The first time Max Thornton laid eyes on Nyla Naren in the bustling central plaza of Port Nexus, he knew she wasn't human. The iridescent violet shimmer of her skin under the spaceport's artificial sunlight was a dead giveaway. That and the fact that she had 4 arms. Yet there was something undeniably alluring about her. The way her amber eyes caught the light, her graceful movements as she navigated through the crowd, and the subtle melody of her voice when she spoke to the customs officer. Max was no stranger to alien species. As a freelance cargo hauler with 7 years of interstellar transport experience, he'd seen his fair share of the galaxy's diverse inhabitants. But the Narians were relatively new to Earth's diplomatic circle, having only established formal relations 3 standard years ago. Most humans had never met one in person. "You're staring," a gruff voice said beside him. Max blinked and turned to find his longtime friend and occasional business partner, Hank Jorson, giving him a knowing look. "I'm not staring," Max replied. "I'm observing. Professional curiosity." Hank snorted. "Right. And I'm the Emperor of Jupiter. That's professional, all right. Professional interest in what's under those robes." Max felt his cheeks warm. "Shut up. We've got cargo to deliver. Already logged and signed for," Hank said, waving a hollow receipt. "Which means we're officially off duty for the next 48 hours. Plenty of time for you to satisfy your professional curiosity." Before Max could formulate a properly scathing response, Hank had disappeared into the crowd, his booming laugh lingering in the air. Max shook his head and turned back, half expecting the Narian woman to be gone. Instead, she was looking directly at him. Those amber eyes locked with his, and Max felt a strange flutter in his chest. The corner of her mouth, remarkably human-like despite the violet hue, curved upward in what was unmistakably a smile. She moved toward him with fluid grace, all 4 arms swaying slightly with her gait. Max felt suddenly self-conscious in his worn cargo hauler's jumpsuit, smudged with engine grease and smelling faintly of recycled air. "You are human," she said when she reached him. It wasn't a question, but her voice carried a musical lilt that made even the simple observation sound fascinating. "Last time I checked," Max replied with what he hoped was an easy smile. "Max Thornton, independent cargo hauler at your service." "Nyla Naren," she said, extending her upper right hand. Xenobiologist attached to the Narian diplomatic mission. Her hand was warm, the skin smoother than he expected, more like polished stone than human skin, though not unpleasant to touch. A xenobiologist? So you study other species?" Nyla's eyes brightened. "Yes. My specialization is comparative physiology between humanoid species. Your kind is particularly fascinating." "Well, that's a first," Max chuckled. "Humans are usually considered pretty boring compared to, well..." He gestured vaguely at her 4 arms. "Not at all," Nyla said with surprising earnestness. "Humans have remarkable adaptability. Your bodies may seem simple, but they can endure an astonishing range of environments with minimal technological assistance." She tilted her head. "And your emotional expressiveness is quite unique. It makes you exceptionally honest partners for communication. So we're easy to read." "Huh?" Muck schmoiled. "I suppose that might be true." "In the most delightful way," Nyla assured him. "Would you perhaps be willing to assist me with some of my research? I have been authorized to conduct informal interviews with human subjects." Max raised an eyebrow. "Interviews? Simple conversation, primarily, about your experiences, perceptions, physiological responses to different stimuli." She smiled again, and Max couldn't help but notice how her eyes crinkled at the corners, just like a human's would. "I have found that such exchanges over food or beverages tend to yield the most natural results." It took Max a moment to realize she was asking him out, or at least the scientific equivalent. "Are you inviting me to dinner, Dr. Naren?" "Nyla, please. And yes, though I would benefit professionally from our interaction, I find myself personally curious as well." The last part was spoken more softly, almost shy. "Well then, Nyla, I accept, both professionally and personally." They arranged to meet at a cross-species dining establishment called the Neutral Zone that evening. Max spent an embarrassing amount of time in his cramped quarters aboard his ship, the Artemis, trying to decide what to wear. He finally settled on his least-worn civilian clothes. Dark trousers and a blue button-up shirt that Hank once told him brought out his eyes, whatever that meant. The neutral zone turned out to be a sleek, modern establishment with private booths designed to accommodate various physiological needs and food requirements. Max arrived 5 minutes early, but found Nyla already waiting. She had changed out of her formal diplomatic attire into something more casual, though no less elegant. A close-fitting jumpsuit in deep green that complemented her violet skin, with cleverly designed openings for all four arms. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Nyla was a brilliant scientist, but she also possessed a quick wit and genuine curiosity about everything human. Max found himself opening up about his childhood in New Seattle, his years at the Transport Academy before dropping out to buy his first cargo runner, and his dream of eventually owning a fleet of ships. In turn, Nyla shared stories of her homeworld, Neria Prime, with its twin moons and vast purple oceans. She spoke of her prestigious education and her family's long tradition of scientific achievement. "My father is actually the Nerian ambassador to Earth," she admitted, looking slightly uncomfortable with the revelation. "It sometimes creates additional pressure in my work." "That must be difficult," Max said, genuinely sympathetic. "Having your boss also be your dad." "It has its challenges," Nyla agreed. "There are certain expectations about how I should conduct myself, who I should associate with." Her eyes met his meaningfully. "Let me guess, independent cargo haulers aren't on the approved list?" Nyla's laugh was musical. "Not traditionally, no, but I've never been one to follow tradition blindly." She reached across the table with her lower left hand and gently touched his wrist. "I prefer to form my own opinions based on empirical evidence." Max felt a pleasant warmth spread through him at her touch. "And what does your evidence tell you so far?" "That I would like to continue this research well beyond dinner," she replied with a smile that left little doubt about her meaning. 3 hours and several glasses of wine later, Nyla drinking a Nerian equivalent that shimmered like liquid starlight, they found themselves at the door to her temporary apartment in the diplomatic quarter. The walk from a restaurant had been filled with increasingly bold flirtation and subtle touches, a brush of hands, shoulders touching as they walked side by side. "Would you like to come in?" Nyla asked, her voice soft. "I could show you some holographs of Neria Prime." "I'd like that very much," Max replied, his mouth suddenly dry with anticipation. Her apartment was sparsely decorated but comfortable, with a few exotic-looking artifacts displayed in illuminated alcoves. Nyla programmed her holoprojector, and suddenly the room transformed into a panoramic view of an alien landscape, sweeping purple plains beneath a sky lit by twin moons. "It's beautiful," Max said, genuinely impressed. "It is," Nyla agreed, moving closer to him, "but not nearly as fascinating as what I'm currently studying." Her amber eyes were inches from his now, her four-armed embrace enveloping him gently but unmistakably. Max found the sensation exotic and thrilling. He leaned in, and their lips met in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened. Max had kissed non-humans before, an Arcturian exchange student during his academy days, and a brief fling with a Proximan trader last year, but nothing had prepared him for the intensity of Nyla's kiss. Her lips were warmer than a human's, and there was a subtle, pleasant taste reminiscent of cinnamon and something unidentifiable but intoxicating. Their exploration became more passionate as layers of clothing were discarded. Nyla's 4 hands seemed to be everywhere at once, leaving trails of delicious sensation along his skin. Max did his best to reciprocate, finding that the violet skin that looked so smooth visually had a subtle texture that responded beautifully to his touch. As things progressed toward greater intimacy, Max found himself in uncharted territory. Nerian external anatomy was remarkably compatible with human, another fascinating example of convergent evolution across the galaxy. But there were differences too, subtle and exciting in their novelty. Nyla guided him with gentle words and touches, her scientist precision proving remarkably useful in this context. She was both patient teacher and eager participant, clearly enjoying the discovery as much as he was. When a moment of ultimate intimacy arrived, Max was completely unprepared for what happened next. As their bodies joined, Nyla arched back in pleasure, and from somewhere deep within her came the most unexpected sound, a powerful, undulating slurping noise that echoed through the apartment. Max froze, eyes wide with shock. The sound continued, rhythmic and powerful, accompanied by an unmistakable internal sensation of suction that was entirely unlike anything he had ever experienced with a human partner. What? What is that? He gasped, trying to maintain his composure. Nyla looked at him with confusion. Then understanding dawned in her. Amber eyes. Oh, that is normal reproductive physiology for Narians. Our internal, how do you say, lady parts? They create a vacuum seal to maximize genetic material transfer. The sound is simply air displacement. But Max barely heard her explanation. Some primal part of his brain had taken over, triggering a fight-or-flight response that landed firmly on flight. The slurping sound, so alien and unexpected, had completely shattered the moment, transforming passion into panic. Before he could process what he was doing, Max had disengaged, scrambled off the bed, and was frantically gathering his scattered clothes. Max? What's wrong? Nyla sat up, confusion and hurt evident in her voice. Did I harm you? Is this not how humans? I'm sorry, Max stammered, pulling on his pants with shaking hands. I can't. I need to go. But I don't understand, Nyla said, reaching for him with her upper right hand. We were connecting so well. Was the sound disturbing? It's perfectly natural for my species. It's not you. Max lied, unable to look her in the eyes. I just remembered an urgent shipment. Have to get back to my ship. It was a terrible excuse, and they both knew it. But Max couldn't stop himself. The slurping sound had triggered something visceral and uncomfortable within him. A stark reminder that despite their connection, Nyla was fundamentally alien. He finished dressing in awkward silence, mumbled another apology, and all but fled from the apartment, leaving a bewildered and hurt Nyla staring after him. Max didn't stop running until he reached the safety of the Artemis. He sealed the hatch behind him and collapsed into his pilot's chair, heart racing, skin clammy with cold sweat. What the hell is wrong with me? He whispered to the empty cabin. The ship's AI, sensing his elevated vital signs, chirped to life. Biometric readings indicate distress, Captain Thornton. Shall I administer a mild sedative? No, Arya, I'm fine, Max sighed. Just had an unexpected encounter. Your vital signs suggest a severe shock response. Would you like me to access medical databases for? No, databases. Max ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Actually, yes. Access xenobiological data on Narian reproductive physiology. There was a brief pause as Arya connected to Port Nexus's information network. Limited data available. Narians are relatively new to Earth's diplomatic registry. Would you like me to display available information? Yes, please. A holographic display materialized before him, showing anatomical diagrams and text. Max read with growing embarrassment. Narian reproductive physiology includes specialized muscular structures that create negative pressure during mating, he read aloud. This evolutionary adaptation ensures optimal genetic transfer and is accompanied by distinctive sounds due to air displacement. He groaned, burying his face in his hands. So, it's completely normal. I just freaked out over their version of biology. Correct, Arya confirmed. Narian mating rituals are considered quite compatible with human physiology, despite some aesthetic differences. The Interspecies Medical Council has certified them as safe partners for humans. And I ran away like a terrified child, Max muttered. His self-recrimination was interrupted by the ship's communication system. Incoming call from Hank Jorson. Max considered ignoring it, but knew Hank would just keep calling. Except, Hank's bearded face appeared on the screen, his expression shifting from cheerful to concerned as he took in Max's appearance. Whoa, buddy, you look like you've seen a ghost. Or worse, a tax authority auditor. What happened? Max hesitated, then sighed. Remember that Narian woman from a port? The four-armed violet beauty you were making eyes at? Yeah, what about her? We had dinner. It was going great. We went back to her place, and then Max trailed off, not sure how to explain. And then Hank prompted, leaning closer to the screen. And then things got intimate, and her. There was this sound. Max gestured vaguely. Understanding dawned on Hank's face, followed immediately by a wide grin. Oh man, you got the Narian slurp, didn't you? Max stared at him in disbelief. You knew about this? Hank burst into laughter. It's practically legendary among spacers. Narians have this internal suction thing that makes this wild slurping noise. Like trying to get the last bit of milkshake through a straw. But, from there... Yes, I get the picture. Max cut him off. Why didn't you warn me? How was I supposed to know you'd get that far on the first date? Hank wiped tears of mirth from his eyes. Besides, it's not like it's dangerous. It's just unexpected if you don't know about it. I panicked, Max admitted. I ran out of there like her apartment was decompressing. Hank's laughter redoubled. You didn't. I did. God, Hank, I feel terrible. She must think I'm a complete jerk. Or just a typical human with a case of interspecies jitters, Hank said, his laughter subsiding. Look, it happens. First time I hooked up with a Deltaran, I freaked out when their skin changed color. Turned out it was just their version of blushing. So what do I do now? You apologize, dummy. Explain that you were surprised, but that you're still interested. If she's as smart as you say, she'll understand. Max nodded slowly. You're right. I'll talk to her tomorrow. Good man. And hey, next time, just go with it. I hear once you get past the surprise, it's supposed to be quite the experience. Hank wiggled his eyebrows suggestively. Goodbye, Hank, Max said firmly, cutting the connection. He spent a restless night rehearsing apologies in his head, none of them seeming adequate. By morning, he decided the direct approach was best. He sent a message asking if they could meet to talk, half expecting to be ignored. To his surprise and relief, Nyla responded almost immediately, suggesting they meet at a small park in the diplomatic quarter that afternoon. Max arrived early, nervously pacing the winding paths lined with earth plants and a few experimental Narian specimens, their purple leaves shimmering in the artificial sunlight. When Nyla appeared, looking composed but reserved in a formal diplomatic uniform, his mouth went dry. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he said as she approached. Your message indicated you wish to explain your behavior, Nyla replied, her tone professional but with an undertone of hurt that made Max wince. As a scientist, I value understanding. Max took a deep breath. I behaved terribly last night, and I'm deeply sorry. The truth is I was surprised by the sound and sensation. It's not something humans experience, and I reacted instinctively instead of rationally. But that's no excuse for how I left. Nyla studied him for a long moment. I should have anticipated this. It was an oversight in my research. I failed to properly brief you on Narian physiology. No, this isn't on you, Max insisted. You shouldn't have to provide a biological manual before being intimate with someone. I should have been more open-minded, less human-centered in my expectations. A small smile softened Nyla's expression. Perhaps we were both at fault. Cross-species relationships always involve a learning curve. Is that what we have? A relationship? Max asked cautiously. We were certainly developing something of interest before your hasty departure, Nyla replied, a hint of her earlier warmth returning. The question is whether you wish to continue exploring it. I do, Max said without hesitation. Very much so. If you're willing to give me another chance, I promise not to run away again, no matter what unexpected biological surprises might arise. Nyla's amber eyes sparkled with amusement. There are a few more you should probably be prepared for. My species has several distinctive physiological responses during intimacy. I'm all ears, Max said. Actually, maybe we could discuss this somewhere more private. They ended up at a quiet cafe with sound-dampening fields around each booth, where Nyla provided a fascinating and informative overview of Narian reproductive biology. Max listened attentively, asking questions and occasionally blushing, but never showing disgust or dismay. The slurping sound, Nyla explained, is highly valued in Narian culture. It indicates strong attraction and physiological compatibility. It's actually considered quite complementary to one's partner. And here I took it as something to run from, Max said, shaking his head. I feel even worse now. Cultural misunderstandings are inevitable, Nyla said gently. What matters is how we address them. Your willingness to learn is attractive. Their eyes met across the table, and Max felt the same connection that had drawn him to her initially, now deepened by their shared vulnerability and honest communication. Would you be willing to try again? He asked softly. A clean slate. I would like that, Nyla replied, though perhaps with a bit more preparation this time. They spent the next few days getting to know each other better, sharing meals, exploring Port Nexus, and having increasingly candid discussions about their biological and cultural differences. Max introduced Nyla to his ship, proudly showing her the modifications he'd made to the engines and navigation systems. Nyla took him on a tour of the Narian Botanical Exhibit she had helped establish at the port's Scientific Exchange Center. When they finally became intimate again, Max was prepared for the slurping sound. Rather than triggering panic, he found it exotic and strangely exciting, a reminder of the wonderful alien nature of his partner. Their connection deepened, both physically and emotionally, as they learned to navigate their differences with humor, patience, and growing affection. Weeks passed, and what had begun as curiosity blossomed into something neither had anticipated. Max extended his stay at Port Nexus, taking only short-haul cargo runs that would bring him back within days. Nyla adjusted her research schedule to maximize their time together. Their bubble of happiness might have continued indefinitely if not for the realities of their respective lives. Max received an urgent communication from a longtime client, offering an exceptionally lucrative contract to transport sensitive materials to a distant outpost. The catch: it would require at least 3 weeks of travel. I could turn it down, Max said as they lay intertwined in Nyla's bed, her 4 arms wrapped around him in what had become his favorite way to rest. Don't be ridiculous, Nyla replied, though he could hear the reluctance in her voice. This is exactly the kind of contract you've been hoping for. The payment could go a long way toward your fleet ambitions. I know, but 3 weeks is a long time, Max murmured, kissing the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, making her shiver. We can manage, Nyla assured him. My research isn't going anywhere, and I'll still be here when you return. Max tried to focus on the positive, the substantial payment, the prestigious client, the potential for future contracts. But as the departure date approached, he found himself increasingly reluctant to leave. The morning of his departure, he discovered an issue with the Artemis's registration that threatened to delay his journey. The Port Authority had flagged a discrepancy in his ship's ownership documents, a bureaucratic error that could take days to resolve. This is a nightmare, Max groaned as he paced Nyla's apartment. If I don't leave today, I'll miss the rendezvous window, and the whole contract will collapse. Nyla, who had been quietly listening to his frustrations, suddenly stood up. Let me make a call. To who? My father has considerable influence with the Port Authority. He may be able to expedite the process. Much front. I don't want to take advantage of your connections. Don't be proud, Max, Nyla said firmly. This is important to you, which makes it important to me. Besides, it's merely correcting an administrative error, not requesting special treatment. Before he could protest further, she had activated her communication device and was speaking rapidly in the musical Narian language. Max watched, both impressed and slightly uncomfortable as she effortlessly shifted into what he thought of as her ambassador's daughter mode. Authoritative, commanding, and unmistakably from a position of privilege. 20 minutes later, Max received notification that his registration issue had been resolved. His ship was cleared for immediate departure. That's amazing, he said, genuinely grateful, but also feeling a strange new dynamic between them. For the first time, he was acutely aware of the disparity in their social standings. It was nothing, Nyla dismissed with a wave of her lower left hand. A simple matter of speaking to the right person. Well, thank you, Max said, pushing aside his discomfort. You saved my contract. Their goodbye was emotional but optimistic. Max promised to communicate whenever possible during his journey, and they made plans for his return. As the Artemis lifted off from Port Nexus, Max felt an unfamiliar ache in his chest. He was leaving something behind that mattered more than he had realized. The contract journey proceeded smoothly for the first week. Max maintained regular communication with Nyla, sending messages across the vast distances that separated them. Her responses were always prompt and affectionate, though sometimes tinged with a strange melancholy he couldn't quite interpret. 9 days into his journey, he received an encrypted message that made his blood run cold. Max, something unexpected has happened. I'm pregnant. Narian human conception was thought to be impossible without medical intervention, but it seems we've defied the odds. The pregnancy is progressing at an accelerated rate, another Narian peculiarity. Medical scans indicate the embryo is developing rapidly. I need you to come back as soon as possible. My father has discovered our relationship and is displeased. There are complications I didn't anticipate. Please hurry. Max stared at the message in disbelief. Pregnant? It shouldn't have been possible. They had discussed this very thing, with Nyla explaining that natural conception between their species was considered virtually impossible due to genetic incompatibility. Yet somehow it had happened. He immediately altered course, pushing the Artemis's engines beyond safe parameters to reduce the return journey. His client would be furious about the breach contract, but that seemed insignificant compared to Nyla's situation. 2 days later, another message arrived, this one even more. Urgent. My father has arranged a marriage for me with a prominent Narian scientist. It's a political match designed to resolve my condition. He's threatening to revoke my research credentials if I refuse. I've been confined to our diplomatic compound. Please be careful when you return. My father has significant influence at Port Nexus. Max's worry turned to anger. Confined? Arranged marriage? It sounded medieval, completely at odds with the advanced, scientific culture Nyla had described. He pushed his ship harder, ignoring the warning lights on his console. The third message came just as he was approaching the outer markers of the Port Nexus system. I've fled the compound. My father has officially disowned me and revoked my diplomatic status. I'm staying with a human colleague, Dr. Clark from the Xenobiology department. The pregnancy is progressing much faster than expected, already showing significant development at just 2 weeks. Dr. Clark says the hybrid nature may be causing the acceleration. There are concerns about complications. I need you, Max. Max barely had time to process this information before his proximity sensors blared. Another ship was approaching rapidly, a sleek, official-looking vessel bearing Narian diplomatic markings. Attention cargo vessel Artemis, a stern voice announced over his communication system. This is Security Officer Trev from the Narian diplomatic fleet. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. Max knew instantly that this was no routine inspection. Someone, most likely Ambassador Naren, had sent this officer to intercept him. On what grounds? Max demanded, stalling for time as he calculated his options. Suspected contraband transport, came the reply. Your recent course change and excessive speed have triggered security protocols. It was a transparent excuse, but with enough official backing to be problematic. If Max allowed himself to be boarded and detained, he might not reach Nyla for days or even weeks. Making a split-second decision, Max diverted all power to engines and executed a series of evasive maneuvers he'd learned during his academy days. The diplomatic vessel, though faster, wasn't expecting such aggressive piloting from a cargo hauler. Max managed to create enough distance to reach the bustling approach vectors to Port Nexus, where the Narian ship couldn't risk dangerous pursuit tactics amid the heavy traffic. Rather than heading to his assigned dock, Max directed the Artemis toward the emergency medical shuttle bay, a restricted area, but one where he could land quickly and without the usual arrival protocols. It would mean fines and possibly temporary suspension of his pilot's license, but those were problems for later. As soon as the Artemis touched down, Max was moving. He bypassed the standard exit procedures, using an emergency override to open the cargo hatch and sprint across the landing pad. Alarms blared behind him, but he didn't slow down. He commandeered a transport pod, inputting the coordinates for the human residential sector where Dr. Clark's residence was located. The pod's AI protested the unauthorized use, but Max overrode the system using an old freight handler's code Hank had taught him years ago. When he finally reached the apartment building, he was out of breath and wild-eyed. A security scan at the entrance recognized his biometrics. Nyla must have added him to the approved visitor list. Dr. Clark's apartment was on the 12th floor. The door slid open before Max could even announce himself, revealing Hank of all people. "About time you showed up," Hank said, his usual jovial manner subdued. "She's been asking for you. How did you get involved in this?" Max asked as he stepped inside. "Your girl called me after she escaped the diplomatic compound. Figured since I was your friend, I might help. Been coordinating with some contacts to keep her off the radar." Max squeezed his friend's shoulder gratefully. "Thank you." The apartment was spacious but crowded with medical equipment. Dr. Clark, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, was checking readings on a sophisticated biomonitor. "You must be the father," she said without preamble. "Good timing. Her condition is stable but progressing rapidly. We've never documented a humanarian pregnancy before, so we're in uncharted territory." "Where is she?" Max asked, scanning the room. Dr. Clark gestured toward a doorway. "Resting. Go ahead, but keep it calm. Her vital signs have been erratic." Max entered the bedroom cautiously. Nyla lay on a specialized medical bed, her violet skin paler than he remembered, but her amber eyes lit up when she saw him. "You came," she whispered as he rushed to her side. "Of course I came," Max said, taking her hand in his. "I'm so sorry it took so long. Are you okay? The baby?" Nyla guided his hand to her abdomen, which was visibly swollen, far more than should have been. "Possible after just over 2 weeks. The fetus is developing at approximately 4 times the human rate. Apparently, the genetic combination triggered an accelerated growth response." Despite her obvious discomfort, there was a note of scientific fascination in her voice. "Is it dangerous?" Max asked, worry evident in his tone. "Dr. Clark is monitoring for complications. So far, both the fetus and I are stable, just proceeding at an unexpected pace." She attempted a smile. "It seems our child is in a hurry to meet us." Max's eyes widened at the word child. The reality of the situation suddenly crashed over him. "We're having a baby," he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "Yes," Nyla said softly. "A first of its kind. Half Narian, half human. Your father." Nyla's expression hardened. "My father has made his position clear. I'm no longer his daughter in his eyes. He arranged a marriage with Dr. Kelvin, a geneticist who proposed correcting the pregnancy to make it fully Narian." Her 4 hands clenched in anger, as if our child were some kind of mistake to be fixed. Max felt a surge of protective rage. "No one's fixing anything about our baby. Which is why I ran," Nyla said. "But my father has significant influence. He's had my diplomatic status and scientific credentials revoked. Technically, I'm now an illegal alien on Earth. We'll figure out," Max promised. "I've got contacts in the Transport Guild. There are options for asylum seekers. And Hank seems to have assembled quite the support network already." As if on cue, Hank appeared at the doorway. "Hate to break up the reunion, but we've got a situation. Port Security is conducting a sweep of this sector, led by a Narian official. Someone named Trev." Max swore under his breath. "The security officer who tried to intercept me. He must have tracked my landing." "We need to move her," Dr. Clark said, joining them with a worried expression. "This apartment won't be secure for much longer." "Where can we go?" Max asked. "The Artemis is probably impounded by now. I've got a buddy who operates a medical transport service," Hank said. "Low profile, no questions asked. He can have a vehicle here in 15 minutes. "And then what?" Nyla asked, struggling to sit up. "Where can we go that my father won't find us?" "I might have a solution," Dr. Clark said. "There's a research facility in the North American zone that specializes in xenobiology. I have colleagues there who would be fascinated by your case, scientifically speaking. They might be willing to provide sanctuary under the guise of a medical study." "How soon can you arrange it?" Max asked. "I'll make some calls." "Give me 10 minutes," Dr. Clark replied, already reaching for her communication device. Hank left to coordinate with his transport contact, leaving Max and Nyla momentarily alone. "I'm so sorry about all this," Nyla said, her voice breaking. "I've disrupted your life, cost you a valuable contract, and now we're fugitives." Max cupped her face gently with both hands. "Listen to me. None of this is your fault. We created this situation together, and we'll face it together. I'm exactly where I want to be." Tears glistened in Nyla's amber eyes. "I've never met anyone like you, Max Thornton. You defy all my scientific observations about typical human behavior. Well, you slurp during sex, so I guess we're both full of surprises," Max replied with a grin. Nyla's laughter, though weak, was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. Even more beautiful than that once shocking biological function that had started their journey together. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Hank's contact arrived with a nondescript medical transport, equipped with biostabilizers and sensor-dampening technology. Dr. Clark had secured provisional acceptance from her colleagues at the North American Research Facility, with the condition that Nyla would participate in non-invasive studies of her unprecedented pregnancy. Just as they were preparing to move Nyla to the transport, the building's security system announced an official inspection in progress. Through the apartment security feed, they could see a team of port security officers led by the stern-faced Narian, Trev. "We're out of time," Hank said urgently. "They're starting at the ground floor, but they'll be here within minutes." "I'll create a distraction," Dr. Clark offered. "Medical emergency on the 20th floor. Should buy you some time to get to the basement loading dock." The plan worked, but barely. They managed to get Nyla into the transport vehicle and away from the building just as Trev and his team realized they'd been misdirected. The chase through Port Nexus's labyrinthine sectors was tense, with security checkpoints being alerted to watch for their vehicle. "We won't make it to the spaceport," the transport driver announced, checking his sensors. "They've established a perimeter." "We don't need the spaceport," Hank said, leaning forward from his seat beside Nyla's medical pod. "There's an old emergency shuttle bay in the maintenance sector. Minimal security, used mostly for repair crews. If we can get there, I have a friend who can get us access to a short-range atmospheric shuttle." Max looked at Nyla, whose face was tightened with pain. "Are you okay for a detour?" "I'm fine," she insisted, though the biomonitors suggested otherwise. "The contractions have started, but they're still far apart. We have time." Their driver took a sharp turn, navigating away from the main thoroughfares into the less trafficked maintenance corridors. The transport's medical insignia gave them enough legitimacy to pass through the initial security checks, but that advantage wouldn't last long once Trev distributed a more detailed alert. They reached the emergency shuttle bay just as alarms began to sound throughout the sector. Hank's contact, a weathered maintenance engineer named Jorley, was waiting with access codes. "One shuttle prepped and ready," Jorley said, casting a concerned look at Nyla. "Basic medical suite on board, but nothing fancy. It'll get you to the North American zone, but you'll be flying low to avoid traffic control." "Thank you," Max said, helping to transfer Nyla's medical pod into the shuttle. "Don't thank me yet," Jorley replied grimly. "Your Narian friend has friends in high places. There's a diplomatic blockade forming in the upper atmosphere. Official story is public health emergency, something about preventing alien contagions. They're trying to quarantine me," Nyla said, her voice tinged with anger and fear. "Standard protocol for compromised diplomatic personnel. How do we get past the blockade?" Max asked, strapping himself into the pilot's seat and running through the pre-flight sequence. Hank grinned, patting a small device attached to the shuttle's navigation system. "Cargo hauler's best friend, a trajectory randomizer. Makes your flight path look like routine maintenance debris checks. Won't fool them for long, but might get us past the initial cordon." Max nodded gratefully to his friend. "You're coming with us? Are you kidding? And miss the birth of the first humanitarian baby in history? Besides," Hank added more seriously, "you might need some backup." They launched with minimal clearance procedures, keeping to the designated maintenance flight paths until they were clear of the immediate Port Authority zone. Then Max engaged the randomizer and diverted to a course that would take them toward the North American Research Facility. For the first hour, it seemed like they might have escaped cleanly. The shuttle hummed steadily through the lower atmosphere, avoiding the busier transportation lanes. Dr. Clark monitored Nyla's condition, reporting that while the contractions were increasing in frequency, they still had several hours before birth was imminent. Then the proximity alert sounded. "We've got company," Max announced, checking the scanners. "Diplomatic pursuit fesse closing fast." Hank leaned over his shoulder to look at the display. "That's Trev's ship. Must have picked up our trajectory when we changed course." "Can we outrun them?" Dr. Clark asked, securing Nyla's pod for potential evasive maneuvers. Max shook his head grimly. "Not in this shuttle. It's designed for short atmospheric hops, not speed." "You don't need to outrun them," Nyla said suddenly, sitting up despite Dr. Clark's protests. "I need to speak with Officer Trev." "Are you crazy?" Max turned to stare at her. "He's trying to capture you and take you back to your father." "Trev is following orders." "Yes," Nyla acknowledged. "But he's also a childhood friend. We grew up together in the same scientific enclave. Before he joined diplomatic security, he was training to be a xenobiologist himself." "You think you can reason with him?" Hank asked skeptically. "I can try," Nyla said with determination. "Open a channel." Max hesitated, then nodded. If there was even a small chance of resolving this without a potentially dangerous chase, it was worth attempting. He established a communication link to the pursuing vessel. Trev's stern face appeared on the view screen. His expression registered surprise when he saw Nyla. "Dr. Naren," he said formally, though his voice carried a note of personal concern. "I have orders to escort you back to the Narian diplomatic compound immediately." "Hello, Trev," Nyla replied calmly. "Before you carry out those orders, I need you to understand what's happening. I'm pregnant with a humanarian hybrid child. The pregnancy is progressing rapidly, and birth is imminent." Trev's composure slipped momentarily. That's not possible. The genetic incompatibility is apparently less absolute than we believed," Nyla finished for him. "As a scientist, surely you can appreciate the significance of this discovery. Your father claims you've been abducted and coerced," Trev said, though doubt had crept into his voice. "You can see that's not true," Nyla responded. "I left voluntarily to protect my child from those who see it as a diplomatic inconvenience or genetic aberration to be corrected, including my father." Trev was silent for a long moment, conflict evident on his face. "What are you asking of me, Nyla?" "Let us pass," she said simply. "We're traveling to a research facility where I'll receive proper medical care. This child represents something unprecedented, a natural bridge between our species. Don't help my father erase that miracle before it's even born." The silence stretched for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, Trev spoke. "My sensors are experiencing an unusual malfunction," he said carefully. "I appear to have lost track of your shuttle. This will be reported as an equipment failure." Relief flooded through Max. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Trev's expression remained professional, but there was a hint of something like approval in his eyes. "I never had this conversation. For your sake, I hope I don't find reason to have it in the future. Good luck, Dr. Naren." The communication ended, and the diplomatic vessel veered away, returning to Port Nexus. "I can't believe that worked," Hank said, letting out a long breath. "Sometimes people surprise you," Nyla replied, wincing as another contraction hit. When forced to choose between blind obedience and doing what's right, she gasped, doubling over in sudden pain. "Her water just broke," Dr. Clark announced, moving quickly to adjust the medical pod. "The labor is progressing much faster than I anticipated. We need to land immediately." "We're still 2 hours from the research facility," Max said anxiously. "This baby isn't waiting 2 hours," Dr. Clark replied firmly. "Find somewhere to set down. Now." Max scanned the area below. They were passing over a sparsely populated region, mostly agricultural with scattered small communities. "There's a clearing about 3 minutes ahead. Looks like some kind of local cargo depot." "That will have to do," Dr. Clark said, already preparing her medical equipment. The shuttle touched down in a small shipping yard on the outskirts of a farming community. The facility appeared to be automated, with no workers immediately visible. Small mercies, as the last thing they needed was curious locals complicating an already complex situation. They converted the shuttle's main cabin into a makeshift delivery room, with Hank standing watch outside for any signs of trouble while Dr. Clark directed Max in assisting with the birth. Nyla's labor progressed with startling speed. What would have taken hours in a human birth seemed to be condensed into a fraction of that time. Another unexpected consequence of the hybrid pregnancy. "Push now," Dr. Clark instructed as Nyla gripped Max's hand with all four of hers, her strength almost crushing his fingers. The birth itself was a blur of intensity and emotion. Nyla's body glowed with an iridescent light that pulsed with each contraction, a Narian physiological response that Dr. Clark documented with professional fascination even as she remained focused on delivering the baby safely. When the infant finally emerged, its first cry filled the shuttle with a sound unlike anything Max had ever heard. Not quite human, not quite Narian, but something beautifully, perfectly unique. "It's a boy," Dr. Clark announced, quickly checking the newborn's vital signs. "Healthy, as far as I can determine, without more specialized equipment. 5 fingers on each hand, but with a distinctive Narian violet skin tone. 1 set of arms, human standard. Respiratory and circulatory systems appear to be functioning normally." She placed the infant on Nyla's chest, where all 4 of her arms curved protectively around him. The baby's eyes opened, revealing irises of brilliant gold with flecks of human brown. "Hello, Thurin," Nyla whispered, using a name they had discussed during their journey. "Welcome to a very complicated world." Max stared in wonder at his son, overwhelmed by a surge of love and protectiveness so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "He's perfect," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. The moment of peace was shattered by Hank bursting through the shuttle door. "Hate to break up the family bonding, but we've got company. Multiple vehicles approaching, and they don't look like locals." Max moved to the viewport, and his heart sank. A convoy of sleek, official-looking vehicles was making its way toward their location. "How do they find us?" he asked. "The shuttle has standard emergency location protocols," Dr. Clark realized. "Even with the randomizer masking our flight path, once we landed, the system would have automatically registered our position." "It's my father," Nyla said with certainty, clutching. "They're in closer. He would have resources to access those emergency protocols through diplomatic channels." "What do we do now?" Max asked, looking from Nyla to their newborn son. They were in no condition to run, and the shuttle couldn't take off again quickly enough to escape. "We stand our ground," Nyla said with surprising strength for someone who had just given birth. "My father needs to see his grandson, needs to see that this isn't an abomination or diplomatic incident. It's a child. His grandchild." Max wasn't convinced that would be enough, but they had no choice. "Hank, do we have any weapons on board?" "This is a medical transport," Dr. Clark objected. "Of course there are no weapons. There's a cargo stunner in the emergency kit," Hank said, already retrieving it. "Short range, non-lethal, but better than nothing." They didn't have time for further preparation. The vehicles had arrived, surrounding the shuttle. Through the viewport, Max could see security personnel taking positions, a mix of human Port Authority officers and Narian diplomatic security. And there, emerging from the central vehicle, was Ambassador Naren himself, his tall, imposing figure unmistakable. "Let me talk to him first," Nyla insisted. "Not a chance," Max replied. "He sent Trev to capture you. He tried to force you into an arranged marriage. He wanted to correct our baby. He's still my father," Nyla said softly. "And for all his faults, he follows Narian traditions of family honor. Once he sees they're in, he'll have to acknowledge him." Before Max could object further, a communication request came through the shuttle system. Ambassador Naren's stern face appeared on the screen, his expression unreadable. "Nyla," he said, his voice formal and cold, "you have caused an interplanetary diplomatic incident, violated multiple regulations, and embarrassed our family name. I am here to resolve this situation." "Hello, Father," Nyla replied calmly. "I'd like you to meet your grandson, Naren." She shifted position, allowing the ambassador to see the infant in her arms. For a brief moment, genuine shock registered on his face. The child survived the birth? he asked, his composure slipping. He did more than survive, Nyla said proudly. He's thriving. A perfect blend of human and Narian. The first of his kind. Ambassador Naren's expression hardened again. This changes nothing. The child must be properly examined by Narian medical specialists. His existence poses unknown risks. His existence poses no risk except to outdated prejudices. Max interrupted, moving into view beside Nyla. My name is Max Thornton. I'm Naren's father, and I won't let you take my son or his mother anywhere against their will. You have no authority here, human. The ambassador dismissed him. This is a Narian diplomatic matter. Actually, a new voice interjected as another communication channel opened. This falls firmly under Earth jurisdiction. A woman in the formal uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps appeared on a split screen. Ambassador Naren, I'm Director Reyes of Earth's Interspecies Relations Bureau. We've been monitoring this situation with great interest. This is an internal Narian affair, Ambassador Naren insisted. A Narian citizen gave birth on Earth soil to a child fathered by an Earth citizen, Director Reyes countered smoothly. Under the Interspecies Relations Accord that your government signed 3 years ago, that makes this very much our business. Max and Nyla exchanged surprised looks. Their plight had apparently reached higher authorities than they had imagined. Furthermore, Director Reyes continued, Dr. Naren has already filed for emergency protection under Earth's Xenobiological Research Protection Act, citing concerns about forced medical procedures. That application has been provisionally approved, pending formal review. When did you? Max began to ask Nyla. Dr. Clark helped me file the paperwork during our journey, Nyla explained quickly. I wasn't certain it would be processed in time. Outside, Max could see that a new set of vehicles had arrived, these bearing the markings of Earth's Diplomatic Corps. Ambassador Naren, Director Reyes, said firmly, I suggest we all take a step back and approach this historic situation with the care and respect it deserves. The birth of the first natural humanarian hybrid is a momentous occasion that could advance relations between our species tremendously or damage them irreparably, depending on how we proceed. The ambassador's face remained impassive, but Max thought he detected a flicker of uncertainty. May I see the child more clearly? Ambassador Naren asked after a long moment. Nyla carefully adjusted therein so that the camera could capture his features better. The baby chose that moment to open his golden brown eyes and make a small, questioning sound. Something shifted in the ambassador's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his rigid posture. He has your mother's eyes, he said quietly to Nyla. The same golden tone. For the first time, emotion crept into his voice, not anger or disapproval, but something almost like wonder. Would you like to come aboard and meet your grandson properly? Nyla asked gently. The ambassador hesitated, then nodded once, sharply. I will come alone. Minutes later, the shuttle door opened to admit Ambassador Naren. He entered cautiously, his tall frame seeming to fill the small cabin. His eyes went immediately to the baby in Nyla's arms. Father, this is the Run, Nyla said. The Ren, this is your grandfather. Max stood protectively near them, wary but willing to give this moment a chance. Hank and Dr. Clark had discreetly stepped back to give the family some privacy, though the cargo stunner remained within Hank's reach. Ambassador Naren approached slowly, looking down at the infant with an unreadable expression. Thurin gazed back with his golden brown eyes, making a soft, burbling sound. May I hold him? The ambassador asked, his formal demeanor cracking slightly. Nyla looked to Max, who gave a small nod. She carefully transferred Thurin to her father's arms. The ambassador held the baby with surprising gentleness, studying his features with intense concentration. Thurin reached up with a tiny hand and grasped one of his grandfather's fingers. He's strong, Ambassador Naren commented, something like pride flickering across his face. He comes from strong bloodlines on both sides, Nyla said pointedly. The ambassador looked up at Max, really seeing him for the first time. You are the father. It wasn't a question, but Max answered anyway. Yes, sir, and I intend to be in my son's life, no matter what. Even knowing the challenges he will face, The prejudices? The uncertain future? Especially because of those things, Max replied firmly. He'll need both of us to navigate being the first of his kind. Ambassador Naren looked back at his grandson, who had fallen asleep in his arms. He was silent for a long moment, seemingly engaged in an internal struggle. The arranged marriage to Dr. Kelvin has been annulled, he finally said, and your research credentials may have been prematurely revoked. That situation can be rectified. Nyla's eyes widened in surprise. Father, this child is of my blood, the ambassador said, as if that explained everything. Perhaps in Narian culture it did. Whatever circumstances led to his creation, he is family, and family must be protected, not rejected. He carefully handed the ring back to Nyla. There will be complications, of course. Diplomatic protocols to navigate. Medical examinations, voluntary ones, he added, seeing Max's expression harden. But we will face these challenges as a family. The word seemed to cost him some effort, but the fact that he said it at all was significant. Outside the shuttle, Director Reyes had apparently worked some diplomatic magic of her own. The security forces were standing down, and medical personnel from Earth's Xenobiology Division were being allowed to approach. It seems, Ambassador Naren observed dryly, that your son has already begun forming interspecies alliances before he is even a day old. Perhaps he has a future in diplomacy. Max laughed, the tension of the past days finally beginning to release. Or he might become a cargo hauler like his dad. Either way, we'll support him. Indeed, the ambassador agreed, with what might have been the ghost of a smile. Though I would prefer diplomacy. In the days that followed, a tentative peace was established. Max and Nyla, with their inn, were provided accommodation at a specialized medical facility where their son could be properly monitored. Ambassador Naren pulled strings to resolve Max's legal issues from the unauthorized shuttle flight and the abandoned contract. Hank stuck around, appointing himself honorary uncle to the inn and flirting shamelessly with Dr. Clark, who pretended to be immune to his charm. The Harmony Coalition, the informal name that emerged for the network of humans and aliens who had helped them, continued to grow, with more people coming forward to offer support, information, and resources for the unique family. Director Reyes arranged for Nyla's research position to be transferred to Earth's Xenobiology Institute, where her first-hand experience with cross-species compatibility would be invaluable. Max found himself in the unexpected position of becoming an advocate for interspecies families, using his connections in the Transport Guild to help others in similar situations. The galaxy, it turned out, had more mixed-species couples than anyone had realized, most of them keeping low profiles due to fear of prejudice. One evening, as they sat in their new home, a modest but comfortable apartment near the research facility, Max watched as Nyla gently rocked the Rin too. Sleep. The baby made a soft sound, not quite human, not quite Narian, but entirely his own. I never thought my life would turn out like this, Max said quietly. A few months ago, I was just a cargo hauler with a dream of owning my own fleet someday. Are you disappointed? Nyla asked, looking up at him. Not for a second, Max replied honestly. I found something better than a fleet. I found a family. Nyla smiled, her amber eyes shining with emotion. Even with all the challenges we've faced, all the ones still to come. Especially because of those, Max said, moving to sit beside them. Besides, I figure if I can get past the slurping thing, I can handle pretty much anything. Nyla laughed, the musical sound waking the Rin, who blinked up at his parents with his golden brown eyes. The baby made a small, gurgling noise, followed by a tiny but unmistakable slurping sound. Did he just? Max started, surprised. He did, Nyla confirmed, her eyes dancing with amusement. It seems he inherited some Narian traits after all. Max looked at his son, then at Nyla, and felt a wave of love so powerful it took his breath away. The sound that had once sent him running in panic now filled him with joy, a symbol of the unique bond they shared and the extraordinary new life they had created together. Well, he said, gently touching Naren's tiny hand, I guess that slurp is officially a family trait now. Indeed, Nyla agreed, leaning against him contentedly. Our own special sound. Outside their window, the night sky was filled with stars, each one a potential new world to explore, new barriers to break, new connections to forge. But for now, their universe was complete in this room, with this child, and the unlikely love that had brought them all together. The slurping sound that had once driven them apart had become the very thing that symbolized their bond. Unexpected, unconventional, and perfectly, uniquely theirs.